Good. Now let us record first of all, let's begin by giving charity. Here we go. Charity. Here we have our charity box. Here we have our money. And let us give from what we have, what God has given us. Let us give to others. So start the day off with charity. Tzedakah. Tzedakah. Tzedakah means justice, just doing with our money what God wants us to do. That's why He gave it to us. Okay. Number one. Number two. Let's start learning. Let's understand the topic of Matav Omer Rizal, what the rabbis say. We began this yesterday, but we'll do it again. It's better. It says it in Pirkei Avot, the ethics of the fathers. It is better 1 hour. The Sha'am means even 1 instant. It's better even 1 instant of tshuva and maisim tovim, of being aware of God. Tshuva means to be aware of God. Tshuva means to return to God. It's a little bit more than being aware. Being aware of God, that's an intellectual thing. And tshuva means that you actually change your life according to this awareness. The more infinite you realize that God is, and the more grateful you become that God is creating you, so the more you act accordingly. That's called doing tshuva. Tshuva means to return. You return to the truth. When a person is born, so the truth is covered over. And because God's creating us every moment, so God's covering over the truth every moment. And tshuva, and the reason He's doing it is that we should just come back to our senses and see the whole big picture, that we're just creations, and act according to the way the Creator wants. That's called doing tshuva. Tshuva means to return. Okay, so when a person does tshuva, tshuva means to return to the awareness that I'm being created, and I'm being created for a purpose, and God is creating me. And the God is the one that has the purpose. That's what the Torah is. Then you start doing good deeds, maisim tovim. And usually the reason it doesn't say just doing mitzvahs, it says maisim tovim, because the word tovim means to shine. Shine. So you do commandments that are alive. You're doing it for a reason. You're doing it to repay the Creator, to connect to the Creator. So it's better 1 moment of that in this world than all of the world, than all of the life of the world to come. Now, the world to come, that basically means all the good stuff that's waiting in the spiritual worlds, except for what we experience here. It means all of the upper worlds. There's what's called the lower heaven, the upper heaven. It's called the days of the Moshiach. It's even called the world to come, the raising of the dead. And it says all these things are just so to speak, rewards. Rewards. There's nothing that can compare to every instant of life if used properly. Right now, and there's nothing can compare to right now if you do what you're supposed to do. Tshuva and maisim tovim. So forget about going to heaven, forget about the world to come, forget about all this. It's secondary. It's not what's of prime importance is right now, this very moment. Of course, this moment you can never put your hands on it because it's always fleeting away. We can't grab on to this moment, but that's what we've got is this moment. So doing tshuva and maisim tovim, returning to the Creator and doing good deeds, repaying the Creator, is incomprehensible. It's incomparable. It says it's better 1 moment of doing tshuva and maisim tovim in this world than all of the worlds to come. It says the Rebbe, was that so? But there's other places in the Torah that seem to say exactly the opposite. What do they say? They say like this. 1 second. Let's get this thing. There we go. Torah Lab, you have to understand, the whole purpose of doing tshuva and maisim tovim and good deeds is that every time you go do a good deed and you do it with the proper inspiration, intention, as it says, you make a garment. You make a garment for your soul. And this garment of the soul is the ability, like you put on sunglasses, you want to look at an eclipse of the sun or something, so you put on sunglasses, these thick sunglasses, and that gives you the ability to look at the sun. The same thing, if you do what God wants in this world, so God is giving you like sunglasses, He's giving you garments that you can appreciate the upper worlds. It's called Beziva Shechina. You get pleasure from the ray of God's presence. The Shekhinah is God's presence in the future worlds. Like it says in the Zohar, the pasuk, it says Avram Zaken Babi Yamim, in this week's Torah portion, that Abraham was old, coming in days. What type of days did he have? Of course, if he was old, he had a lot of days. What does the Torah have to tell us? The Torah says that he was old and he was coming in days, arriving in days. It says, which days? These are the upper days. Inun Yomim Iluyin. These are the upper supernal days, spiritual days. And the Zohar continues, Viloi, woe to the person, to high gavra, to that person, to Gora Yamin, that is missing of one of these upper days. The Kad Ba'inin, because you need these upper days of good deeds that you did, La'albasha le, to clothe yourself, Ba'inin Yomim, in that days. The Yom, the Pogam, but a day that's missing, or that's blemished, blemished is chasra le me'ahu lavusha. It's missing that garment, and because you're missing that garment, so you cannot appreciate the world to come. Right? It's like going in and getting whatever, standing in a line of food or whatever it is, of getting money, and not having a vessel. You haven't got any vessel to hold on to it. So what? The Inyan is like this. Okay, so here we have a question. In the Zohar, it says the main thing is going to the world to come. And in order to really appreciate the world to come, these spiritual worlds, is you have to have Torah and commandments. You don't have Torah and commandments, you can't appreciate the world to come. Huh? Can't appreciate it. It's like you're going into a bank, you've got $1 million in the bank, and you don't have any identification. The money is yours. We believe you, sir, that that's your name, but you have to have identification. The same thing, you get up into heaven, who knows what's waiting for you up there, but you can't get it because you don't have any Torah, no commandments. You didn't do anything, right? That's your garments. So if so, the main thing is going to heaven. That's what we live in this world for, to go to heaven. But in the Pirkei Avot, it says exactly the opposite. It says, no, the main thing is this physical world. There's nothing like doing good deeds in this world. So are the good deeds that we do in this world, are they an end in themselves? And that's pure godliness? Or are the good deeds that we do in this world just garments by which we can appreciate the real goal, which is going to heaven? Well, what's the goal? Right now or heaven? We'll see. We can say it another way. Are the commandments that's the goal right now, or are the commandments just the means to the main goal, which is going to heaven? Let's see. The Inyan is Inyan Ziva Shechina. What is this idea of going to heaven and appreciating the ray of God's presence? This is not like the life force which is in the world. Like it says, Ata mechayet kulam, you enliven everything. But everyone in this world, at least everyone that comes to these classes, is alive. You're alive, and no one has any idea what that means. No one has any idea where life comes from, how it works. Right? All these Eastern religions, they worship these different levels of consciousness. You achieve a higher level of consciousness, higher level of awareness. Right? But where does it come from? Let's say that that's what life is. Where does this consciousness, where does it come from? So here we're living in this world, and we're depending on life, and we have no idea what it is. Know what it is. So some people could say, well, it's just like batteries. You buy something and it's batteries. You just, it makes your brain work. Like they have artificial intelligence. They have robots and things like that. That's what life is. Where does it come from? It comes along with the body. It's a process, a natural process that comes. Okay, there's a lot of questions that can be asked, but not as many questions as can be asked on God does it. That's even more questionable. Okay, so here we got life. Life is inside of us. So that life, we can say, that's God. God is the life force which is inside of us. Which that's a point. That is definitely true. God enlivens everything. Atamachayas kulam, God, you enliven everything. But that's not like the life which is in heaven. Shachayas alakus, that the life force which is in the worlds, eno musag benira, you can't understand what it is. So when you go to heaven, it says you get pleasure from a ray of godliness. So you can say to yourself, it's not such a big deal. This, we also get pleasure. I mean, that's what I'm living from. I'm living from a ray of godliness. I don't understand what's going on. Eno musag benira, you can't understand what your life is. Commercially, like for instance, the life, how life spreads out of your soul in your body. Bischalkus of evorim, in the different limbs. Your hands work, your feet work, your eyes work, your tongue works, each one in its individual way. And each one each one is different from every other one. The limbs. Can we say the same thing about God? God in the upper worlds? Says the Rebbe, no, of course not. Bavare, certainly, chayos aruch, the spiritual life, lo shayach chalal, it's not relevant that it'll be also division of life force into details. Ke'en baruchni shum tamuna v'tziur. It's true that there's different angels and everything, but it's not the same thing as this physical world. Here you have your physical hand moves, and it's got spiritual life inside of it. So that spiritual life which is inside of your hands is not the same thing as the spiritual life which is revealed in the upper worlds. The upper worlds, everything is spiritual. There's no division between physical and spiritual. So if so, what do you experience when you go to heaven? After you die, what do you experience? Says, well, let's take a little bit closer look at this. All we have is the life force which is in our body. So let's try to extrapolate from that a little bit about what's going on in the upper worlds. Of course, like I said before, this is all faith, right? This is all faith. That you are alive and that you have a soul that enlivens your body. That's not so much faith, right? It's just an obvious thing. Of course, it's possible for a person to say, listen, that's just like electricity, it activates my computer. So it's just this general electricity that it just activates all these different aspects of my body. So the Rebbe said, okay, but that's one way of explaining, yes, but I'm telling you that it's not so. I'm telling you have a soul, and that your soul becomes divided into the aspects of your body, into the limbs of your body, which is not the same. The spiritual soul affects the physical body. This is not the same thing as up in heaven. In heaven, there's no physical. It's not divided. The spiritual is not divided in any way that's similar to the way it is in our body. Because the reaction of the life force which is in our limbs, nikar v'nira, you can see. You stub your toe, your soul in your body reacts. So here the spiritual force which is in your body, it reacts immediately to any changes. But the essence of life, you can't feel it at all. Right? What exactly your soul is, you don't know what it is. Similarly, the life force of God, which enlivens all the worlds, which are limited, the tachlit and bounded. The spiritual force of God, which enlivens the worlds, is not limited like the soul which is in the body. For instance, the life force which enlivens the how do you want to call it, the universe, the heavens. Now the heavens seem to be round. We cannot say the spiritual force which enlivens the physical world, we can't say the spiritual force which enlivens the world, right? The sphere, taking the sphere of the earth. The spiritual force which enlivens it is a sphere. It's round. the power of sight, which enlivens our eyes, even after a person doesn't have eyes, you can still see because in your mind's eye. So the spiritual force which is in your body is sort of commensurate to the shape of your body, which is not the case the spiritual force which enlivens the universe. Rak shehispashas achayas, the life force is in a kli bekabel, tamunas kli amakabel chayos. Rather, the life force is one, and it goes according to the vessel that it goes in. Even though that the life which is in the worlds and it's there, but the life itself is not limited to any place. So, in other words, a simple language, the spiritual life that is experienced in the upper worlds is not a type of life which can be limited to a physical vessel. Limited to a physical vessel. And it does enliven the vessel, something like electricity. The same electricity that activates my computer is the same electricity that activates my oven. And there certainly are two different things. Two different things. But there we're talking about two physical forces. Electricity is a physical force, and this is a physical force. It's just a little bit different, right? It's you can't see it in the same way. The electricity or gravity, you can't see it in the same way you see the effects that it has. It's not in the same way, but nevertheless, it's still physical things, which is not the case. The spiritual life force which enlivens everything. What's the force that enlivens gravity? It is not in the shape of gravity. What is the life force which enlivens and creates the world? It's not round. Okay. So in other words, we're dealing with God. And here we're saying the life force of God, which is spiritual, is not like the life force of God, which enlivens our body, which that aspect of it is physical. Okay, so how does the spiritual part of our body, after a person dies, he goes to heaven and he experiences the ray of God's presence? What does that mean? What does that mean? So we're saying the life force that you have is not the same thing as the godliness that you experience in the world to come. Yuvan, we can understand this, when it says, Malo koloretz kavodo, that the whole world is filled with God's glory. Maloi koloretz kavodo. It says that's what in Ezekiel, they heard the angels saying, Malo koloretz kavodo. Let me have a look and see where this is from. Give me 1 second. Give me one moment. Malo koloretz kavodo. I'm almost sure that's where it comes from. 1 second. Give me 1 minute. I'm sorry. I just want to find out what this is. Here we go. Here we go. Here we are. Wrong place again. One minute, excuse me. What is this? It doesn't say. All right. Oh, here it is. Here it is. It's in Isaiah. It's not the vision of Ezekiel. It's the vision of Isaiah. Isaiah's vision of the angels. The Targum, and it says, Ziv Yikare, the ray of God's glory. This is just a ray and a spreading out of God's glory alone. That's God's kvodo, it says, his glory. I can see, but it says that the Shemayim at the earth, animale. But there's another place where it says the heavens and the earth, I personally, not just a ray of me, that I fill. At the Shemayim at the earth, animale, that the heavens and the earth, I fill. Let's see what this says. Hold on, it's going. This is from Jeremiah. Jeremiah. I fill. The Inyan is both of them are true. What fills the world? God's glory or God's self? Ani. Both of them are true, like it says, V'zeshomer is all. That's what the rabbis say. But Mokom Shata Motza Geduloso, the place where you find the greatness of God, that we call God great, infinite, the creator, the king of the universe. That shows how great God is, right? It says, no, that shows how small God is. That's where what we call God great, God great or infinite. That's the lowest aspect of God. It's a big miracle that God can bring himself down to the point where he's accessible to us, that we can call him great or big or infinite. Where you find God's greatness, there you find God's humility, lowness. Now let's just take a short step back over here. God he creates man so that man will appreciate God. That's why God created man. This whole business doesn't make any sense, but here we are. We're here. Right? We're in the world. It's a fact. And we're trying to go backwards and trying to figure out what happened in the beginning. But it's not really 100% backwards, because God gave the Torah. When he gave the Torah, so we have a look from the beginning also. But we have to understand the beginning in our minds. Why? Because that's what God wants. That's why God created man. That's why God creates man. So he creates us. One of our responsibilities that we have is to appreciate God. And to understand that God is not exactly like what we are. Okay, so wait. It says, where do you find anything that you can describe God, any description you can give of God, that's only how God has lowered himself down to be describable, to be approachable. Not like the world thinks, that the greatness of God is the fact that God enlivens all the worlds, or he creates the worlds. That's great. You can create something here. God creates the sun, he creates the moon. You know, I mean, science reveals that there's all these galaxies and nebulae and whatever it is in the solar systems, that in seemingly infinite numbers. They just go out. There's no, you have to be some sort of a genius even to imagine how there could be an end to what happens after the end. There's a big wall. What's in that? There's an infinite number. That shows how great God is. God is creating all this. That's amazing. And just looking at our physical world, in the sky, how many different types of birds there are, how many types of different bugs there are, how many different types of germs there are, and molecules and atoms and all this stuff around. That's just in our world. Then you go down in the sea, there's all these weird fish down there, and there's millions of this type of fish, and sea groupers or whatever it is, and these fish with little lights dangling in front of their eyes that they have, to catch other little fish that they have something else dangling in front. There's billions and billions. You want to tell me that God creates all this? Yeah, that's what we believe. That's the message of the Jewish people to the world. It says, whoa, God is really great. We say, no. Let's not go overboard. You should definitely be excited about this. But that which I just explained, how God creates the world, that's the lowest aspect of God. That's small change for God. You read it, this is a tremendous descent for God, that he brought himself down. In other words, this reality that we see, the universe, this is the lowest of types of reality. We can't even imagine that there's a different type of reality than this. But the upper worlds, the heavens, they are more real in this world, and they are incomparable to God. All of the upper worlds are just descending. This is how God, descending God, that's called the ray of God's presence. God comes down to enliven them so why are we saying all this? Because when we pray, we're praying to the essence of God. All these things that impress us, that's just aspects of God. When we pray, we say, God, please, we're talking to the essence of God, right? The essence of God. That's why idolatry is so bad. You pray to a person, you pray to an idol, you pray to a spirit, a ghost or something, right? That's why it's so bad, because you're missing the whole point of God's greatness. You're saying that God can't come down into the world and be close to us. Yes, he can. And if God comes down into the world and he's close to us, that's just the lowest point of God. That's how God comes down. With that, what it says, God, you enliven everything. We're not praising how great God is. That God's greatness is incomprehensible. And to understand them, there's no number. Right? You can say how great God is. He creates all these stars, these planets, and all the molecules. That's nothing for God. What are we praising God? We're praising God that, God, you are so amazing that which you came in creating the world, that's the lowest aspect of you. That God, you can come down to make a world, and it seems like you're separate from us. You're creating a world, and we're part of the world. That's the way we look at it here. But Olam Haba, when a person goes to, after you go to heaven, that you get a ray, pleasure from the ray of the Shekhinah, this is understanding the essence of God himself. Not what God does, but what God is. That's going to heaven. Oh. So now we can understand how it is possible that the soul itself, which is just a creation, yesh v'davar, a separate thing on its own, can get the essence of God. How can the soul get even a little glimpse of the ray of God? Now we're saying all that the heavens and everything, that's also a ray of God, but it's a different type. It's getting a clear vision of what God is. So if so, how can we, limited creations, all we are is creations, how can the soul, which is just a creation, have any glimpse of the Creator? Even though the soul is just so we can say very simply, the soul is a portion of God. So therefore, because the soul is a part of God, so we can grasp God. Huh? Says no, even though the soul of the Jews is called as a part, that's what it means. The Jews are the sons of God. The soul is the part of the essence of God. This is sort of like a drop of a seed which comes from the brain. Okay, what's the Rebbe saying? According to Judaism, according to Kabbalah, the seed of the father that gives birth to a child, once it meets the egg of the mother, which is in the womb of the mother, this power of birth, which is in that seed, comes from the brain of the father, or more exactly, it comes from the essence of the brain, the power of pleasure from the father. That's why the sexual act is connected with the pleasure, because it awakens the essence of the father's brain, if you want to call it, and the essence of the brain, that's keter, the level of keter, it's above chachma, that's pleasure. And that pleasure is manifested in the power of birth in that seed. Okay, so we say that the seed, when it's the seed of the father's power of growth, which is present in the father, that gives birth to the child. So that's like the seed. That's the seed. It gives birth, putting it into the mother. The mother is like the earth that the seed grows in. So really the child is present in the seed, which is in the father. Where does the seed originate? In the brain of the father, the power of pleasure in the father's brain, the highest aspect of the father's consciousness. So if so, the child is already there, right? So we say, no, you can't, it's impossible to say, it's ridiculous to say, that seed, that drop of power of birth, which is implanted in the semen of the father, that when it's in the brain, it was a physical thing. The power of birth is not physical. If so, something would be lacking from the brain. Something would be lacking from the brain to give birth to a child. But it's not so. It's a spiritual power that is invested in the seed that has the ability to activate the birth process. But be'emes, really, Hatchalas Hamshachasa from the Moach is Koach Ruchani. It's a spiritual thing. Ella She'achakach, but afterwards, when it comes down through the it says it comes down through the spinal cord, this power of birth comes to this nishtanis, it comes down and becomes a physical seed. So the power of birth, which is in the father's brain, comes down through the nervous system, through this, and it's enclosed in the seed of the father, and that gives the ability to instigate the process of giving birth to initiate the process of birth, to give birth to a child, physical child. So says the Rebbe, the same thing, the soul that's enlivening us in our body. Where does it start from? It starts from pure godliness. But it comes down and it becomes a created thing by itself. If so, when the soul is in the body, it does not manifest the fact that it's the Son of God anymore. When the soul was in the essence of God, so it was we could say it was part of God, the Son, just like this, the power of birth, when it's in the Father's brain, so it originates in the Father's brain. It's united with the Father. But when it comes out, it's already a physical thing. It's separated. The same thing is the Jewish soul. So when the soul is united with God, then it's a portion of God. When it comes down into the physical world, so then it seems to be separate. I mean, it is separate. It's a separate person. If so, how can the soul, this soul after a person dies, that same soul, how can it understand godliness, the essence of godliness? How? So the Rebbe says, I'll tell you how. Okay, now, I just want to go back again. When we're talking about God over here, we're talking about reality. And again, well, I've said this, I know I said it a lot of times, but I want to say it again. We're talking about reality. God is more real than this world. But don't think that means that the upper worlds are God. The upper worlds are also more real. But the upper worlds, they're more real because they get more of a glimpse of what true reality is. Of what true reality is in the upper worlds. But God is the creator of all reality. Like we said before, God doesn't really exist. He creates all existence, me and you and everything. So it's totally incomprehensible what God is. He's creating the spiritual worlds all the time. God is not a being in any sense of the word that we can understand. And that which we do understand, what being is, what existence is, that's not God. That's just aspects of God. It's a ray of God. It's a creation of God. But nevertheless, in the upper worlds, there's pure rays of God, which gives us a little bit of a glimpse of how nothing we are and how everything God is. A little bit of a glimpse. So the question is, how can the soul, which the soul is just a creation, and it's enclosed in the physical world, and even when the soul leaves the body, it's still my soul. How can it get a glimpse of the essence of God? It's already left this godly awareness, and it's become physical, a person, right? This soul is now Tuvia. When the soul is in the body, it's the Tuvia when he's in the body. When it's out of the body, it's Tuvia when he's out of the body. But it still is a creation. How can it possibly grasp in any way what even the angels can't grasp? The angels are going berserk. They get a little tiny ray of godliness. But you have to remember, the angels were never physical. The angels were always spiritual. Therefore, the angels can appreciate godliness. But not the case of the soul. The soul is put into the body, it becomes physicalized. As soon as it becomes physical, that's it. It loses the angels like this. The Hine Kasiv, it is written, Vayavo Moshe b'toch ha'anan, says that Moses, we asked the same question about Moses. Moses went up on Mount Sinai and he received the Torah. What was written? What was on Mount Sinai? The essence of God. The Torah and God are one. Moses went up on Mount Sinai. There was a pure revelation of God. All of the other Jewish people, they couldn't take it. They heard the first two commandments. They said, Moses, we can't take it anymore. It's just too much. And Moses went up there 40 days and 40 nights. Right? The Jewish people heard it for 2 seconds and their souls were jumping out of their bodies. Moses was up there for 40 days and 40 nights. How many seconds are there in 40 days and 40 nights? Multiply, I don't know. Right? 60 seconds in every minute and 60 minutes in every hour. And multiply that by 12. So you got 60 times 60 times 12. And then multiply that by 40, whatever the number is. So that's how many seconds that Moses was up on Mount Sinai. That's how he could take. And the Jewish people couldn't even take 1 second of it. Right? I am God. It says that everything God revealed was in one word. However it was, I mean, the Jewish people couldn't take it. Nobody, not Aaron, not the holiest of Jewish people. But Moses did. How did Moses do it? After all, Moses was a human being. It says, because Moshe that Moses on Mount Sinai went inside of the cloud. And it was there for 40 days and 40 nights. Lechem lo achal. He didn't eat any bread. He didn't drink water. His physical body, Nizam, was nourished mimazon ruchni, from spiritual food, like it says, lechem avirim achal ish. It's in Psalms. Mamash, ukamo, just like hamalachim, just like the angels. How could it be that a physical human being could receive food, spiritual food, like the angels? But they're totally separate. Moses didn't become a spiritual person. He went up on Mount Sinai. There's one opinion that says the Mashiach is going to come from the dead. Actually, there's several opinions that say that he can come from the dead. Even in the Talmud, it says. The Talmud says if he comes from the dead, he's going to be like Daniel. But one of the proofs that Mashiach can come from the dead is that it says that Moses was the first redeemer. Mashiach's going to be the last redeemer. Just that Moses went up on Mount Sinai for 40 days. And practically speaking, he was dead. He can't eat and not sleep or not drink for 40 days. You know, you can't do it. Not even you can't do that. You can't hear what God says even for 1 second. You go crazy. And here Moses was up there for 40 days and 40 nights. So when Moses didn't come down afterwards, so everybody naturally assumed that he was dead. Well, in fact, he sort of was dead. He was totally removed from the world, just like a dead person. But the fact was he was sort of like that, but he really wasn't dead. The fact is he was alive. So how can a living human being that Moses went up on Mount Sinai in his physical body, he didn't just go to sleep and have a spiritual vision. How could he go up there in a physical body and receive the essence of God? So he said very simply, he went in a cloud. There was a cloud. That's the whole thing of the cloud. That Moses was covered up in this cloud. This cloud, Shorsho, its source, was a tremendously high level of godliness. Ma'od Nala, so to speak, even higher than any ray of godliness in the world. And this cloud gave the ability of Moses, it could link the godliness with the creator, with the creation. That's the cloud that Moses went into. But this cloud really has a tremendously high source, but it came down and became physical to be a garment for Moses. And we're going to say in a moment that that's the whole thing of the commandments. The commandments are like a cloud by which the soul, by doing the commandments in the world, so that they become a cloud, a garment for the soul that it can appreciate the upper worlds. That by means of this, yochel hasig, it can grasp godliness. And that godliness can actually nourish the physical body. Like a person that sees a pure light and he looks at it through like sunglasses or through a veil. So you ever see these people, these scientists, they take pictures of eclipses of the sun, but before the sun is eclipsed, maybe even while it's eclipsed, I never really saw. Before the sun is eclipsed, it's the sun. You can't look up at the sun. So they have these thick glasses that they look through. The same thing, Torah and the commandments, the physical commandments, that their source is tremendously high. It comes from the upper will of God. It comes from God's essence, wisdom. She'em miyuchadim bo. They are united with God. And they are in this physical world. The Torah that's in this world is the same Torah that God gave on Mount Sinai from his essence. The commandments that we do are the same exact commandments that God, from his essence, wants us to do right now. This is even higher than the ray of God's presence. That the ray of God's presence, this is only a spreading out of godliness. Like we said, how God makes himself humble. It comes down, this presence of God, and is put into these the physical world, not like the soul and the body. The soul and the body becomes physicalized. But the life force which is in the commandments, this is pure godliness. It's in this world, like the parchments of your tefillin and the wool of your tzitzit, and physical charity that we give. At the beginning of every class, we give charity. So therefore, when a person works at Torah and commandments in this world, let me pull this over a little bit here. When a person works at Torah and the commandments in this world, so he makes garments that the soul can clothe itself in heaven. Sha'al Yadam, that by means of this, the soul, which is a creation, can grasp the ray of godliness, pure godliness. And that's what it means. It's good one moment of tshuva in this world, because the Torah and the mitzvahs that you do in this world provide these garments, which the source of these garments come from Ratzon Elyon, God's upper will. The physical world, that's just God's lower will. And therefore, the commandments, which that's part of God's upper will, they are better than all of the life force which is in this world. Which is in this world is just like a ray of God's presence. But the garments, that's like the cloud that Moses went into, that's even higher than the revelations that were on Mount Sinai, the cloud. Nevertheless, they are called garments because by means of them you can grasp what God is. Oh, so if so, here the Rebbe is giving us sort of a different look at what the commandments are. The commandments, to show how great the commandments are, they enable us to appreciate the rays of godliness, the aspects of godliness up in the upper heavens. After we leave this world, they provide garments, and these garments are higher than the spiritual worlds themselves. That's enables us to join pure godliness with our soul. And if so, the commandments are, so to speak, higher than pure godliness. They are God himself. They're not godliness. It's God himself. That's what the commandments come from. As we're going to explain more, God willing, tomorrow. So what did we learn today? We learned that there is this world, there's the spiritual worlds, there's the godly force which enlivens this world, which is incomparable to the godly force which is revealed in the spiritual worlds. And then there are the commandments, which are higher than the whole entire business. That comes from the essence of God, the commandments, and that enables us to appreciate the light of God, which is in the upper worlds. Okay, but the point is not this appreciation. It's just showing how great the commandments are, that they enable us to do this. The commandments come from the essence of God. And one of the benefits of this is that they provide garments, like the cloud that Moses went into on Mount Sinai. They provide garments which enable us to appreciate pure ray of God, which is revealed in the upper worlds, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. Good.